This is the Motivated Business Show, hosted by me, Mark Terrell, the author of Motivated, the Reluctant Leader's Guide to Building a Business that Sets You Free. In my book, I share the 7-step process to get the measure of your business. M.E.A.S.U.R.E is an acronym that stands for Mirror, Evaluate, Action, Systemize, Unify, Review, and Energize. On each episode, I'll be chatting to a business owner about how they stay motivated and how they've got the measure of their business. So without further ado, let's find out who's joining me on this episode. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Motivated Business Show with me, Mark Terrell. Today's guest I met a few years ago. We were having a chat at a networking meeting and he was telling me that he was looking for someone to join his business. I then introduced him to a connection of mine and thankfully that was worked out well because they found someone to join the business and yes, it's nice to be able to connect people up to solve a business problem. So more about that in a while. Just before we get stuck into the topics that we're going to discuss today, let's just introduce you to a couple of things. My book that I wrote, Motivated, is something I wrote a while ago, a couple of years ago now. And in that book, I talk about the 7-step process, which I alluded to at the beginning of the show. So I'm going to be referring to that towards the end of the podcast. If you'd like to contribute to the podcast just to keep the wheels in motion, then you can do that by buying me a coffee, and there's a convenient QR code which will take you to my Buy Me a Coffee page. And if you fancy buying me 2 coffees, I'll send you a copy of my book as a thank you. Right, without further ado then, let's bring on today's guest. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning.
Looking forward to the conversation, but before we do that, let's give you opportunity to introduce yourself properly.
Certainly. My name's Tom Wood. I'm CEO at Rawlings Group. Rawlings Group is a group of divisions that provide a range of services and products to food, drink, cosmetics, and retail companies. So one of our main businesses does glass packaging, that's Rawlings. We also have a business called Vigo that does equipment for that same sector, so food and drink companies. And we have a paper bag company called Paper Bag Co that do eco, cotton and paper bags for retail and the promotional space. We're a company of almost 100 people with a turnover of around 40 million.
Wow. Excellent. Thank you, Tom, for that intro. So there's there's a number of topics we're going to cover today, but I think the place where we should start is how you've grown your business, and you've done it in a particular way. So if you want to just fill us in with the way that you've actually grown the Rawlings business since you joined it.
Yeah, certainly, Mark. So I joined... The business existed before me. I joined as a director, but not a shareholder, in about 2011. And at the time, we were solely in the glass packaging space. So we were providing bottles and jars to some quite well-known companies, but quite a narrow product set. And I think in the early days, it was a very traditional business. It was kind of like walking into the 70s. Everything was sort of paper-based with old systems and old processes. So I think for the initial years, it was really about bringing in the right tech and solidifying the team with sort of the existing products that we had. So kind of mini steps really, and the business wasn't ready for significant change. So we grew that way and we grew organically, but after quite a couple of years, I kind of realised that we were probably a little bit at risk in terms of the space we were in, and I fancied more challenges, so that's when I started looking at growing by acquisition. So at that time, we still had quite a small team. We're probably towards 15 people, grown from 10 to about 15 people, and we were doing fairly well. But really, to get a shot in the arm and to grow the business faster, acquisition seemed like the sensible option. So we did our first acquisition in 2015, and that was for the first one, it was quite simple. It was a one-man band that had a product set that was quite close to ours, so also glass packaging, called Clipper Containers, but some quite well-known bigger clients. So that was quite a low risk acquisition because it didn't come with complexity of people. It was still a share purchase, so we were taking on the liabilities of the business, but it was one that we could integrate quite quickly into the business and dip our toes into the waters of mergers and acquisitions. So that was 2015, 16. And based on the success of that, we continued the strategy of looking for businesses to acquire and to merge and to bring into our group structure. So since then, in total, we've done probably about 6 or 7 acquisitions, a lot of them fairly small, but we have done 3 or 4 that have involved new sites, new people, potentially new brands, new product sets. And obviously there's a high level of complexity that comes around that. What that has done is obviously enable us to have a much more wider offering of products and services that we can cross-sell between the divisions, and has given us the ability to create a group structure where there's supporting services such as HR, finance and operations that underpin the commercial divisions that are experts in their field and what they do.
Well, we're going to talk about in a while about how your role has changed, has the business changed, always grown, I should say. So you talk about 15 people and now it's over 100, you say. But before we do that, when you actually, I suppose when you're thinking about mergers and acquisitions, you're thinking about, firstly, you're looking at a product, so a business that has a product, maybe it's what's it producing. But not only that, you're thinking about the customer base they've also got, because you can sell your existing products to that new customer base, I'm guessing.
That's exactly right. And so I think 2022 we acquired Vigo Limited, which was a lovely business in Devon that specialises in drinks equipment for equipment for drinks filling businesses. So they might do pasteurizers, kegging machines, canning lines, labelling machines. And that segment, and the Southway space as well, that segment is exactly where Rawlings was sitting with the glass packaging. So the kind of companies that we were selling and producing and making bottles for and jars for, we're getting their equipment from the companies like Vigo. So what it allowed us to do was ensure that those products and services were kind of aligned. So the equipment that Vigo are creating would be optimized and work well with the bottles that we're selling through Vigo. But also, obviously, from a cross-sell perspective, be able to start talking about a wider range of services to customers of both products, both divisions. Sorry. So that's been a really successful strategy. And, for example, with the Vigo team as well, you have engineers who are on the field who are working very much consultatively with those customers, and there's a high level of trust. So. In terms of then widening that offering to packaging and other components that they're interested in, that it was an absolute no-brainer, and that works really successfully.
Yeah, I can see how that would work, and then you've got the expertise in-house, and it's always easier to have something that's in-house rather than having to rely on suppliers. And so, yeah, makes absolute sense. So I'm assuming things have changed for you in those years as well, with regards to the way you approach your role. Leading a team of 15 is a lot different than leading a team of over 100. What's the biggest changes that have you've had to embrace with your role within when what you do for the business?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, Mark, before I had this role, I was in a corporate role, and that has challenges, and there's a whole, we probably won't get into it today, but there's a whole story around, I guess, why I left corporate to go to a very small business. Going into a very small business and seeing it as kind of a project in terms of bringing it into the 21st century, doing the basics was my initial focus. And I think, as you said, when you're a team of 10, 15 people and you're on one site, communication is very simple, and kind of your leadership and your style can come across just by osmosis, really. You're in a room, you're talking to people, you're understanding them, you're speaking to them on an absolute daily basis. I think as you grow, that communication, the contact points between numbers of people becomes harder. So, there's people that you're recruiting that you don't you're not necessarily part of the recruitment process, so you don't have to establish that relationship necessarily, and comms becomes more tricky. And I do think and additionally, when you grow by acquisition, you're getting different sites potentially around the country where you're not there day in, day out. So we now have 4 different offices. We have 5 warehouses, and each with staff in each one. And I think it's very tricky when you're used to being able to just judge what's happening because you're in the room with everyone, to overcoming those biases when people are in other places, and you're not having the same relationships or the same vision of everywhere. And that's a really tough thing. I did find that quite hard, and I still think in terms of getting that communication consistent, that's the journey for us, and we're still learning about that, and we haven't quite got that right yet. So yeah, the role has changed, and obviously one of the critical things has been to build out a really functioning senior leadership team, as well as solidifying the board as well, making sure that governance is working well. So that reliance on a leadership team and ensuring it's working well is absolutely critical. And we've been on a journey with getting the right people on that team over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's a nice place to be in as a leader, knowing that you've got very good people in your business who are running the business well, and that necessarily my role has changed in terms of how hands-on I can be with the day-to-day operations, and with making sort of being a bottleneck of the business essentially, with every decision coming through me. That can't happen now.
Yeah. But I mean, as you know, and I know, once you get in a position of leadership, it's not just about you, it's about developing the right people and finding the right people, as you say, to allow the business to grow. And so how do you manage that? How do you, on an individual basis, what's your role, do you see, with regards to those people, those key people in the business? What do you do with those people to get the most out of them?
Well, from a group perspective, we have brought in a operating system called Entrepreneurial Operating System, E.A.S.U.R.E. I believe you are aware of it. We spoke about it previously. That's something that we've been developing. It's not something you can drop in straight away. And just for people's clarity, it's not a technical solution. It's not a computer system. It's really just how you set up your business, how you structure yourself, how you get the right people in the right seats, how you set your values, your vision, what your priorities are on a short, medium and long-term basis. I think we probably got to having 3 sites where I felt like we were a bit out of control, I think, in terms of how we were managing people, how we were aligning priorities, how we were ensuring everyone was on the same page of what we were trying to achieve. So at that point, I looked out for something that could help us, I guess, hone and clarify what that was. And I've been aware of EOS for several years, and I think I was initially quite reluctant to go down the EOS route because it's very American. A lot of the language is if you're British, and the way it's structured is quite difficult to kind of swallow, because it is quite cheesy and it's quite black and white. And then through my network, I met someone who had a very successful business in tech who was using it, and was chatting to them about it, and then met someone else who was using it. And that kind of changed my view, because it was, that peer proof that it can work, that people will accept it, that there are benefits if you can see past, I guess, some of the Americanisms and all that kind of stuff. So, so with that peer proof, I started investigating more. We had more meetings, and then decided to implement it. And it's a long process, because I think the smaller the business, the easier it is. It's designed, I think, for teams of probably 8, 9 up to 250. So if you're a very small team, you can probably implement it quite quickly, because obviously the process of change is simpler in a smaller business where you can pivot quickly. So for us, we've been doing it for about 1.5 years. It probably took the first year to get it working at all levels of the organisation, and even now we're probably about 70% there. I guess we're no way ninja level EOS practitioners, but there are benefits, and I think one of the things it's allowed us to do is to sort of really get so purely from the benefits across the business, purely from a leadership team perspective, just to get us on the same page and try and, especially when we're growing by acquisition and there's new people coming into that leadership team who maybe have very different experiences and backgrounds, just to align ourselves and get that transparent, honest conversation about what we're doing, ensuring that we're working in a similar way across the business, and we are aligned. We're not at cross purposes, and I think it can be a risk. And the underpinning of a kind of semantic and a language that's common and understood, because I think again one of the challenges of growing is just things getting lost in translation and that lack of clarity that comes with people having different understandings of perhaps the same word or the same goal. So
no, yeah. I get what I get what you're saying about EOS. It's not perfect, but I think if you read the concepts and all the things that it sort of encompasses, it all makes sense, and it's just a matter of embracing it and going with it and accepting some of the things that feel a bit uncomfortable. And I definitely think it's a great concept if you're and interesting what you said there. It's probably something that you want to implement sooner rather than later. So when you are small and got aspirations to grow, get it right now when you've got a small team, and then it will just like flow out into the other businesses as you grow, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we probably should have done it. Ideally,
hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I want to pick up on a particular concept in EOS, and that's the visionary and integrator roles. And so we were talking before we went live about your role is now changing. And so do you want to explain how that's changing and maybe talk about the visionary and integrator roles within EOS?
Yeah, certainly. One of the key, there's lots of them, but one of the key concepts is, there's a way the senior leadership team works, which is very structured in a way, but very transparent, open and honest, and non-hierarchical at all. But the concept of the integrator and the visionary role is that there's an integrator who is the traditional sort of MD or COO role who manages all the functions of the business. So they're the ones who roll their sleeves up. They're managing the finance teams, marketing teams, and they'll typically have someone from the leadership team reporting to them, overseeing those key functions. Mm-hmm. And they're on the ground making sure the business day to day churns. The visionary role doesn't really have any direct reports, and that might typically be the CEO role or the founder role. So that's the seat I'm sitting in now. So in terms of how that's changed my relationship with the business has been that now I'm focused on long-term strategy, perhaps key products, key customers. I'm not really in the detail and the weeds, as they call it in the EOS, of the business. I'm elevated to be looking at where we want to be in several years' time, so I can focus on long-term strategy. And obviously, M&A, we talked about earlier, fits into that. And getting back to your work, Mark, that certainly sits within kind of my motivated areas that motivate me, rather than perhaps getting tied up with the details. So it's been a tough journey, but we brought in our new MD at the end of last year, who sat in the integrated role, Tracy. So she's picked up the reins and comes from a background of being MD of a bigger business than ours. So that experience of working through that complexity of an operation of a business, which, although I had a background in corporate, I haven't really had that experience of mid-sized business. And we're sort of getting towards 50 million turnover in the next couple of years, so we are getting towards being a mid-sized business. So she's better at that than I am, and has brought in a lot of process and a lot of change in terms of how we work and how we do things, because I think in a way it was slightly chaotic before. We were growing quickly, but it was working, but I perhaps avoided the things that I didn't enjoy as much, weren't motivated as much. So sort of systems around kind of people and and just getting on top of making sure people were treated in a similar way and managed in a similar way. So all that's come through that process. So, but it doesn't mean it hasn't been tough. So I've moved into the visionary role. It means that I've got more time to focus on looking for new acquisition targets. So, the deal flow in terms of where we want to be, what kind of companies culturally will align us with us, and a bit more space to think about strategically where we want to be in a few years in terms of what our product offering is, what our organic growth should be, what the culture of the business should be, and being out there as well with some of our key clients and talking to our key clients. And that's been really helpful, having that headspace and being able to sort of, also think about other things through growth that we haven't thought about before. So, partnership deals. So we just launched something distributing a product that's a B2C product. It sits in the sort of glass packaging space, but it's a completely new initiative. And I don't think, without this structure, I would have probably been too into the detail to have had the headspace to take it on and move forward with it. So, there's examples out there of very big businesses that did have this, the visionary and the integrator, the person that was on it day to day, and then the person that was looking a little bit further down the road. So I think the model is fantastic, and it will be the sort of a lot of the engine that will allow us to grow and continue to develop and change.
Yeah, interesting. So I think we should definitely talk a little bit more about what Rawlings does. And one of the things that you've mentioned is about packaging. And one of the things that comes, I did mention this before we went live again, was that I noticed that there was a gig or a festival on the Downs in Bristol, which was all about being eco. So one of the things that they, lots of things they had brought together was, electricity was, it wasn't diesel generated, it was battery packs. But when you bring people together, there's always the catering and then there's the packaging that goes with it. So I'm just wondering how that works, because one of the challenges that I can see with regards to packaging is that it's that throwaway mentality. We've all been to festivals where you walk in out of the venue and you're just kicking, all sorts of rubbish that's been thrown away. So how does, what's your strategy with regards to helping businesses with that challenge with packaging?
Yeah, certainly, Mark. I mean, so from a packaging perspective, and the original business, we were single-use glass, and I think, I think there's a place for that because we don't have the systems to reuse everywhere, but we're very keen on getting the most environmentally friendly option for our customers, and I think that's driven also our acquisition strategy. And our partnership strategy. So as I said, we've just partnered up with a Portuguese company that have reusable jars for fermenting, canning, storing, preserving, and that's fantastic because they're going into retailers where customers can use those, obviously for refilling in zero waste shops and also for doing stuff at home. But the challenge, I think, is the systems and how the local authorities at the moment, will bring this in and how they can do reuse. So reuse is the future. In the meantime, for single use, it's quite a complicated picture. I think a lot of people, sort of have a view that plastics is evil, and obviously single-use plastics is not great. But you've got to look at the recyclability, and you've got to look at the difference between, say, reuse plastic and single-use plastic. So there is a place, I think, for a more nuanced and complex environment, different packaging formats. We're not just in glass. We also do small amounts of plastic. We also do some aluminium. And obviously, with our acquisition, I think I mentioned earlier, into the paper bag company, there we're printing reusable cotton jute bags. So they're obviously quite very much environmentally friendly. And our paper bags, which are printed in the UK, all come from sustainably sourced forests, and that's something that we're very proud of. So it's a complicated environment. I think, in terms of, as I talked about, moving to the visionary role, for me, it's looking at how how the space is going to develop and what is possible, and who we can partner with to continue the drive to reuse, as well as obviously working with bodies within the glass industry to ensure that it's as environmentally friendly as possible. Glass is a heavy product, but it's completely inert, and it is completely 100% recyclable into exactly the same format as it was before, unlike plastic. So a glass bottle can be crushed down and remade into a glass bottle. So in terms of the impact on the environment, if we can get that the system of collecting cullet, which is recycled glass, and fed back into the system, that is a sustainable option, because it also has a much lower melting temperature when you're melting glass down and creating another glass bottle than it does if you're trying to create a glass bottle from core components. So, but yeah, it's a tricky.
Yeah, I think it's where it ends up, isn't it? It's where that thing ends up, and we don't want to end it up in the ocean and the rivers and all the other things, isn't it? If we can stop that, that would be one step forward. But then also thinking about what those products are made from is another thing, which is obviously what you're all about. So
100%. I mean, luckily, I think the consumers now do really care about this. So there is obviously see pictures from festivals such as the one you talked about in Glastonbury, where there's so much waste. But I think it for us and the research we've done and how we understand our consumer and customers. So our direct customers are looking for options. They want to do things better. So that is, I think, for the long term, gives me a bit of comfort that we're moving in the right direction. And Rawlings would love to be part of that journey and continue to offer more sustainable options to our customers.
Yeah. Brilliant. Right, Tom, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to sit back and I'm going to share a little bit from my book. As I mentioned at the start of the show, I wrote the book, and in that book, I shared a 7-step process, which I call Getting the Measure of Your Business. That process always starts here, understanding yourself, understanding who you are, what motivates you. We've alluded to a couple of things that Tom is going through with regards to his role and the motivations he has with those things. So understanding what role is right for you in a business is key, I think. And then evaluating where you're going, taking action, and systemizing things as soon as you can, so that you've got a system. We've mentioned E.A.S.U.R.E, which is a system which runs a business, and you embrace it. There's no reason why it shouldn't work. It's easier said than done. It's not something you can just throw in, but something that if you embrace a system and you make it work, then ultimately it will, especially if it's been proven by other businesses. There's no reason why it wouldn't work in your business if it doesn't. So think about how much systemizing you have in your business. And then the last 3 steps are essentially around building a team, unifying a team. Reviewing is making sure that you're still on the right path and that nothing's changed. And energizing is passing over and energizing the responsibilities to your team. So I just wanted to share a couple of other things. Motivation is always a key concept within when we talk on these podcasts. And what we tend to find is when we talk about the visionaries, they tend to have more of these motivators. So it's more about being creative and innovative, more about freedom, autonomy, doing things in their own way and having more freedom, and then making a difference. And so once you have a lot of those motivators that are driving you, then they tend to sort of fit in with that visionary role, because it's about the future. Growth motivators are very, very growth focused, obviously, and that tends to fit in with that visionary concept, which is in E.A.S.U.R.E. And I think every business needs a visionary. When I was running our retail business, I was more the integrator. My father was the visionary. And when he stepped away, I stepped into that visionary role as and when I needed to. And I also wanted to share, and we haven't really talked about it too much, but your role clearly has changed from when you joined the business. And this is a concept or a model I use with regards to leading a business. There's a concept of high challenge, high support in the centre, but really there's a process that we need to follow. We need to always start with a vision, mobilise that vision, develop the people to allow that vision to continue, and then enabling others to take on the responsibility as time goes by. So that's a little bit of what I share in the book. I'm going to give Tom the opportunity to comment on what I've just talked about then. Have you got anything?
Yeah, no, particularly around the growth motivators, I can definitely confirm that I'm sitting over the right-hand side of that model, and there's certainly a lot of the things I'm seeing on the left-hand side that I'm not very good at or have got wrong in the past. And I think as you grow, it's fantastic being able to get really, really good people in who are awesome at that stuff, and mean that you're a balanced leadership team. And I think that gives me a lot of comfort knowing that you can do that and grow. And I love the mirror part of the model, which is interesting, because if you stay somewhere long enough, not only does the business change, but you change as well. So I'm not the same person as I was 13 years ago, and certainly the business isn't. Both these things mean you do need to look in the mirror, you do need to review what works and what hasn't worked, and that will change over time, and that's normal.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom, for your time today. Sadly, time has run out. Hopefully we'll get an opportunity to catch up soon. 30 minutes is no time. So thank you for all you shared, and hopefully we'll catch up again very soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Tom, for all his contribution there. So if you want to connect with Tom, you can see what he's all about and what Rawlings are all about. So if you think he'd be a good contact, then get in touch with Tom. Just to wrap things up then, as I mentioned at the top of the show, my book, The 7-Step Process, is in there. There's actually 9 chapters in that book. 7 chapters cover the 7 steps of the M.E.A.S.U.R.E process, but the other 2 are about just as equally important topics, that is looking after yourself and also making sure you enjoy the journey. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, if you'd like to contribute to the podcast, then you can do that by clicking through and using that QR code and buy me a coffee. That would be much appreciated, and it keeps the wheels in motion. And if you buy me 2 coffees, I would be more than happy to send you a copy of my book. So that's today's episode done and dusted. I hope those that joined live got lots of content and value from it. If you catch this on replay, don't hesitate to leave a comment, and myself or Tom would be more than happy to answer those questions if you have them. But for now, we wish you a good day. Have a good day, and we'll see you again shortly on the next episode of the Motivated Business Show.